research, and we're going to talk about it today. One of the things I think that people appreciate about you so much, Charles, is that you're not one of these people who wants to dive into a story and be the first one out of the gate with some shooting from the hip kind of thing. You tend to sort of stand at the back of the room, examine things, form a very cohesive hypothesis, and then take out the big gun and fire one shot directly down the middle. And I think that's what we're going to see today. How are you, Charles?
I'm great, Jason, and thanks for that. I'm great, except, for all this flying, I get a little bit of, not a head cold or whatever, but my voice is a little bit deeper. Sorry for that. Yeah, let's dive in. You and I have been at this now for quite a while, and unfortunately for people who might grift using a charity, there are a lot of publicly available tools that you can use to quickly get to the bottom of what may be going on. And I mentioned to you offline, and I think the viewers know that when I initially worked for Dillon Read, there was a rule that we couldn't travel, and while we were traveling, we couldn't read confidential business papers of any type. So I had to read something on a 5-hour, 6-hour, 10-hour flight. So I for about 20 years, Dillon Read and afterwards, all I read was mystery novels and espionage novels and things like that. And I learned from all that when you're trying to solve a mystery, you really do want to follow the money. And in this case, the money trail, unfortunately, on Turning Point USA and its various affiliates is extremely troubling at surface level. You and I have seen many patterns that people will come to young people with opportunities to skyrocket from being a high school senior into being a celebrity. And as a young person, most people tend not to be critical enough of what they're being told. So here you flashed up Turning Point USA at the very top there. And if you go to the left-hand side, you'll see it says it was formed in 2014. Now, I don't know if you want to do deep diving in this open thing or in the paid thing, but we can do a bit of deep diving and prove that this is not true.
Well, the one thing, Charles, to be a bit cautious of is, I think, we're going to be speaking only in terms of verifiable evidence, but
Right.
Why don't we give everybody an overview here, and then when we go to the First Amendment Forum, people can join us on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And of course, people who follow me on X at JG_CSTT will also get that sponsor exclusive content. But this is going to go pretty deep. And for people who are interested in hearing about the various things that happened at Utah Valley University and the mysteries surrounding the murder of Charlie Kirk, this is not going to be a surface level type of thing. So we're going to go pretty deep. Why don't you give everybody sort of an overview, and then we'll dig into the documents and stuff on that second part.
Okay, can I
do whatever you want?
A slight variant. I just want to do one document dive because
Sure.
I think it'll set the crowd into understanding why I'm so concerned. So if we go back to that summary on ProPublica, it says the thing was tax exempt since July 2014. People know that there are various resources. Unfortunately, North Carolina Secretary of State Charity Search is not, as of last night, not working. But the California Registry of Charitable Trusts is. And if you go into that, and I can read you the EIN if you don't have it handy, Jason, and you punch in 80 when you're ready.
No, I've got the EIN right here, 83.
But what's interesting while you're trying to get it is that there are 50 states and there are a number of cities actually that also regulate charities. And through all of these websites, which many of them are quite good, North Carolina is good, New York is improving, California is excellent, you can quickly cross-check statements made by entities like ProPublica or the charity themselves. And as you know from the Clinton Foundation experience, if you say you were started on a certain date, you have to file reports from that date. It's on the right-hand lower side charity search tool. Yeah. So if you punch in without the hyphen 800835023, and you'll see there's something called, that's it, and you look at, there's legacy documents or founding documents, and you go down the founding documents. You see it, Jason, you passed it. You passed it. Founding documents are a bit higher. Right there, yeah, founding documents, hit that. And this is going to show you that the thing was not founded in 2004, tax exempt from 2014. It was founded, I'll read it out to you while you're trying to pull it up. It was incorporated on July 23rd, 2012. And the tax exemption determination letter that we've talked about in the past was issued on July 3rd, 2014, retroactive to July 23rd, 2012. Now, this is important because Turning Point initially was founded as a C4, that is to say, an organization that was an action organization whose deductions were not tax deductible. They changed that approach in 13, and they said, no, we now want to be a 501c3. But they didn't really, and their tax exemption application was submitted in 2013, but they didn't really in that application explain properly how they shifted from a C4 to a C3. Nonetheless, the crooked IRS, or the Department of the Crooked IRS under Obama, granted retroactive exemption of this thing to July 2012, 23 July 2012. And now the key thing is that there are no reports filed for this thing that I see in 12, 13, and maybe there's one in 14 that explains all of this. Now, this is troubling because while I like the message of Charlie Kirk in the main and of Turning Point in the main and the approach of going onto these campuses and challenging orthodoxy as revealed by the wokesters who run these places, what I really don't like to see, and I frankly feel that there should be a double standard in the area of regulating charities, that when you have mom and apple pie, patriot charities out there, law and order charities, they better damn follow the law. And as in the case of the American Conservative Union, the American Conservative Union Foundation, and the grifters, I believe, that operate around that entity and other right-leaning entities like the National Rifle Association and others, it does the cause of liberty and openness and democracy no good to have sloppy organizations that make public filings that appear to me to be false and materially misleading, even if the cause and the person in Charlie Kirk appear to be noble. If you're going to go into the land of charity, you need to understand that that's not a way to have a mansion on a golf course as a young person. That is not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be out there. You're not supposed to, the organization and all the people around it are not supposed to derive more than an insubstantial amount of private gain. What that means under the law, as I understand it, I'm not a lawyer, private gain is not simply financial benefit. Private gain is any kind of advantage, edge, that you or people around your organization might derive. And to turn to Matt Schlapp and the schlapping exercise, he's going around the world creating these the versions of the American Conservative Union in many different countries around the world, with his wife at his side and other grifters at his side, and a consulting operation, political consulting operation, that is generating more than $10 million a year. That's something that you shouldn't be doing. I don't mind. I mean, I don't like the tawdry area of elective politics, but I understand that campaigns are expensive and political consultants need to be paid, maybe not as much as they get. But that realm of seeking political advantage, partisan political gain, should be completely separate and apart from a charity. And to the extent that Matt Schlapp does it, and maybe the people around Kirk do it, that then gives license to the Clintons and the Obamas and the Carvilles and the various people on the other side of the equation to go out there and say, look, everybody does this. If we don't do it, Kirk is going to do it, or Kirk's people are going to do it, or you name the person on the right who might be doing the same thing. We've got to take that out of politics. and so, well, out of the realm of charities. And in the in the next for-profit or a paid subscriber version, we're going to take you into some disturbing details of many different companies that seem to have been created around this Turning Point USA, a very suspicious endowment that has gone from nothing into almost $100 million without explanation, and that has failed to file. Something called Turning Point Endowment has failed, I believe, to file a recent tax filing, which I think would be required, and other irregularities that we really see in the case of the Clinton Foundation, unfortunately, are showcased across the many different operations that are part of this Turning Point USA, in theory. Now, there are also unconfirmed rumors, which I think we need to try to confirm, of Charlie Kirk being concerned about the state of the financial reporting or the reporting of his entities. And again, I haven't seen any proof of this yet. I've seen reports that allege it, that he was calling for a DOGE-style exercise to understand what was really going on in this charity. Now, people who are familiar with our work here on the Clinton Foundation and others will know that charities actually, there's no need for a charity to be extra complex. There's frankly no need for an organization to be extra complex. I've found through personal experience that running one office, if you can run one office to handle your worldwide operations, you're far better off. That second office does not double the complexity of what you're trying to do. It more than doubles it. And here in the Turning Point, architecture, we see multiple offices, frankly, in suspicious locations, like in crappy strip malls, separate and apart from the main location of this thing. It just doesn't make much sense to me. Then we see, of course, the troubling pattern of the same accounting firm from an office in Arizona, not only filing tax returns, but also creating audits. And the 990s, the tax returns for the various Turning Point entities, I haven't seen a document yet that reconciles how these different entities share revenue, share expenses, funnel money back and forth to one another. And that's something that, when I don't see that, it makes me very, very nervous. Then you look at the level of the board at the top level. These are not financially astute people. There's one guy who's a certified financial planner, but there's another guy who's a jeweler and a pharmacist, and no disparities meant to pharmacists or jewelers, but when you're trying to put together a complex charity, and also when close to $100 million in revenue, and large amounts of expenses, and then companies swirling around connected to directors and vendors and things like that, you want to have financially astute people who are spending more than an hour a week. This Tom Siddick, the Secretary and Treasurer, spending an hour a week on numbers. An hour in a week, even somebody with my experience, and I'm not saying I have the most in the world, but an hour in a week is not enough to really be on top of a complex set of financial statements, particularly in this case where a big piece of money, the endowment, has not recently filed the reports that I think need to be filed. So this is not a happy moment for me to go into this, because I did admire Charlie Kirk and his fearless approach going onto these campuses. I myself did not have the fortitude to think that I wanted to go back, for example, to Yale or Harvard and try to take on the many wokesters who now run those places, running them into the ground. But here's a young guy who had that fortitude. Now he's dead, leaving behind 2 young children and a wife. It's a real tragedy. You've done a lot of work on the actual murder itself. I'm not as conversant with those details, but I am reasonably conversant with how charities should report. And I think you have a 5-alarm fire in the reporting of these financials, which I hope people in the crowd now will dig into. So that's my opening.
It's a strong opening, Charles. And, just to sort of underpin a point that you raised there, I did receive this from Brian. Forgive me, Brian. Your last name there is Ferentz. Brian Ferentz. I've been on his show, and he actually agrees with my assessment of Data Republican that she's not what she appears to be. He sent this email, which is oddly from September 2nd. So everybody, has been talking about this, but Brian has it. This is from Charlie Kirk, and he's talking about the chief operating officer, effective immediately. Justin Strife, interesting name, is taking on a new elevated role. And this is where he's talking about this, in this role, I have empowered Justin, among other priorities, to engage in an organization-wide DOGE effort. So he says it right here in black and white, and it's signed by Charlie Kirk. Like I said, I know Brian, so I have no reason to suspect that this is anything. I mean, I don't know him. I've been on his show. I've spoken with him. I think he's a diligent researcher. I have no reason to suspect that this is not an authentic memo. People can communicate with Brian and follow him on X, ask him anything they want about this. So that's pretty interesting, wouldn't you say?
Very interesting. Well, since you got that memo, if you don't mind, Jason, I know I said one thing only, but let's just do one more thing. And
whatever you want to do, Charles. I'm not trying to limit you at all.
Yeah. Thanks. Let's go into ProPublica and put in Turning Point Endowment and see what comes out.
Did it already. It's like a cooking show, Charles. Bing, bing. There, hey, chef of the past.
Pow, whatever that guy. Yeah. All right. What's the most recent form that we have for this?
Yeah, that's the thing. It was 2022 seemed to be the most recent, which is
they call it ProPublica 23, but it's actually for the period that ends June 30th, 2023. There should be a form for June 30th, 2024, and there isn't. And this is suspicious. When we talk about the Clinton Foundation and its endowment, you're not allowed to set up an endowment as a charity that lets you do whatever the fuck you want to do. I mean, that is just not the way it's supposed to work. You have a charter, a tax exempt, a statement of your tax exempt purposes in your articles of incorporation. It is modified and narrowed typically in your application for tax exemption on Form 1023. If it's substantially modified, you're supposed to amend your articles. But what the Clintons did is, they let Bill beginning, I'd say earlier, but officially beginning in August of 2001, they let Bill operate from offices in Chappaqua, homes in Chappaqua and Washington, D.C., and an office in Harlem, and just do whatever the hell he wants to do with money that came in to the Clinton Foundation, not designating himself an officer, a director, a key employee, as you're required to do, not really accounting for what he was doing. And then when he got tired of doing that, because he was always, running from here to there to get money, he said, I'll hire this guy out of the London School of Economics who worked for Hillary Clinton in various political capacities. I'll hire him to create an endowment. This endowment literally is set up to do whatever the fuck they want to do. And they raised $250 million for it, US, that we know about. You're not allowed to do that. And of course, our IRS under Obama said, now, wait a minute, this seems like a pretty good idea. Once Obama leaves the White House, we can't discipline that. If we discipline the Clintons, then Obama won't be able to do it. And Biden won't be able. Biden won't be able to do anything. But here, and also in the case of this Turning Point USA, the endowment is huge. As of the last, it's over 50 million US. And these days when we talk about $1 trillion deficits and AOC wants 93 trillion to buy a new climate change bullshit operation. 50 million doesn't sound like a lot of money, but in assets, this thing has, I think, had more than 50 million in assets. And with that, you really do need, in fact, if you're a trustee of something that has more really than, I would say, even 100,000 in assets, you need to have people around you who understand how to manage money. And it's not clear to me that this organization has those people. It's also not clear to me that they may have conflict of interest policies. But as we'll see, those are things that you can write up these fancy policies, but you don't necessarily follow them or have people around the organization who can discipline participants if they break the conflict of interest rules. So, with that memo, I'm inclined to believe and hope that Charlie Kirk was a force for good who trusted too much in the people who'd been around him to get things done properly, but then began to get concerned about what may have been going on. Now, this shows as of June 30th, 2023, it had 55 million in assets. Just this last Friday, there was a very suspicious meltdown in the market, coupled with people who went short, who appeared to have known that the market may be going the wrong way, i.e. known about Trump's tariff deal, tariff pressure on China. And when you have sharp, sudden movements up or down in the market, funds that have borrowed money or people who borrowed money to make investment positions can get just destroyed, literally over the weekend. And so that's one of the perils of having an endowment that's not really managed professionally. The other thing that we'll talk to people in some depth about once we go into the paid version, but there are too many companies, suspicious companies around Turning Point that are either vendors, fundraisers, or connected to members of the family and trustees. And I just don't really like to see that at all. I don't like to see, in a charismatic guy like Charlie and now maybe his wife, you have no difficulty raising money with the internet these days. I mean, you just don't. I mean, Charlie's always out there. He had a podcast. He was on Fox. He had, high presence. And when you have millions of followers, you don't really need to hire multiple fundraising firms who don't seem to file that correctly, their various reports at state level. So this is unfortunately not what it should be. And really to go to a place that I think is the correct place to go, there are too many right-connected firms that have filings and conflicts of interest and people around them who, quote, dedicated their lives to public service, but somehow seem to be living large in private jet flying and mansion owning and, restaurants and fancy travel and all that kind of stuff. And this is not simply, American Conservative Union. It is certainly the National Rifle Association and other things like that. And there is a cottage industry of people who get around these causes and figure out ways to get young people like O'Keefe and now Charlie Kirk and others to jump into this land of motherhood and apple pie and not check carefully enough, are vendors to these charities overcharging? Is there really a need for a multiple office structure? Is there really a need for promotional materials that basically cost money but nobody really reads? And so, this is a personal tragedy for the Kirk family, but I fear it's also going to be a black mark, a negative set of marks on the people who really believe the Constitution is an important document, who revere the American experiment, who want to see openness and freedom and a lack of censorship and wokeness across the country. So I think we need to go into this in some depth. And if mistakes or worse have been committed, people need to be brought to justice.
Well said, Charles. And with that, we're going to make our way over to the First Amendment Forum. People are going to be able to join us there by subscribing on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or on subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Right after the live broadcast, it'll be available to subscribers who follow me at JG_CSTT, but you have to subscribe there to access the sponsor exclusive content. We'll be right back.